Our guest on This is America in the World is Dr. Michael Eric Dyson. Dr. Dyson is the Distinguished University Professor of African American and Diaspora Studies at Vanderbilt University and is the author of the new book, just released, Long Time Coming, Reckoning with Race in America. Dr. Dyson, good to be with you. It is a powerful, powerful book.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it so very kindly.
When you look at race in America, what do you see?
Well, I see a mishmash of competing ends and opposed ideals. On the one hand, we could say it's the best of times because we just had a black president serve for 8 years. We've got extraordinary cultural achievements and landmarks, popular culture being colored black in so many instances. The upward mobility of the black middle class is pretty extraordinary. On the other hand, we've got the persistent inequality that marks this nation. The poorest remain poor and are getting poorer every day. The lack of access to health care, to quality education is remarkable. And of course, the policing in America, the relationship between law enforcement and communities of color is at a nadir. And it continues to explode in raucous and violent and in horrible fashion on the bodies of black people, especially in America. So it's a picture of two Americas, and it's pretty frightening for most of black people. As the basketball player LeBron James said, we don't know what we're going to confront when we meet a police person in this nation. And in 2021, that's an extraordinary statement to make.
When you use the word white supremacy, what do you mean? What's at the heart of it?
Well, what I mean by white supremacy is the conscious or unconscious belief in the inherent superiority of one race, the white race, over all other groups. And it is the institutional, the systemic, the systematic, and the political achievement of dominance by white folk en masse, not individual white brothers and sisters, whiteness as a group. Think about it. In 1856, 57, Roger B. Taney, the Chief Supreme Court Justice, said that black people have no rights that white people are bound to respect. When it's written into the law, when it's ingrained in the culture, when it's reproduced in the folkways and mores of American society, it has institutional and systemic effect. And that means that the belief system is reinforced by politics, culture, and society to form a tight-knit, if you will, assault upon those who are not white in this country.
Is this cultural bias that you talk about, is that in our white DNA?
Well, I don't think it's written into anybody's biology by no means, but it is written into the laws of the land and to the customs and habits and traditions that shape young egos as they grow, right? When we talk about, for instance, when I mentioned the police are not born on Mars. They're born in America. They're born in this case. They're born in America. They're born in this nation. That means they inhabit and inherit certain predispositions, certain ideals. And so, no, it's not written into the DNA. It's not a genetically heritable characteristic that one could pass on. As James Baldwin said, it's a political fiction, but that fiction has had such deleterious consequence on the collective mindset of American society.
When black folks look at white folks, what do they see?
Well, they see people who have often been indifferent to black people, uncurious about who we are. They also see people who have been their friends, neighbors, people for whom they've worked, people who have worked for them. They see allies in the process of American democracy, and they see bitterly opposed figures who, in ignorance, perpetuate legacies of inequality through fear. And so collectively, when we look at white America, we're astonished that so high a number of white voters in this country could embrace a figure like Donald Trump. And yet we are heartened by the fact that many of them voted for Joe Biden, and before that, for Barack Obama. So we see a mixed bag and a mixed lesson and a mixed message that continues to haunt the American landscape.
I want to contrast history with today. When we talk about history, you use the word theft, and you use the word theft of our bodies, our culture, our belonging, our land, and you keep going, a list of things where you say it's been taken away, it's been stolen from us. Talk a little bit about that. Contrast that with how you see that theft operating today in jobs, in housing, in healthcare, and justice.
Yes, sir. Great point. I talk about theft as a kind of not only a metaphor, but a literal occurrence. Black people being extricated from their rest in America, African soil, and brought here to America forcibly against our wills. And that set the pattern. 1619 is the totemic date, but we know that there were Black people here before then, but that signifies the occasion of those 20 and some odd souls arriving in Jamestown in Virginia and being forced against their will to work the land, till the soil, trod the sod, and commit themselves to, making sure that the crop of tobacco and cotton was harvested to create wealth for the dominant white society, stealing our time, stealing our bodies from Africa, stealing our futures, stealing our mothers and fathers, our children, our sons and daughters. So literally the act of theft was the commission of American democracy for many white brothers and sisters, and to express their privileges, their white privileges, their privileges as white citizens, meant the dehumanization of Black people. When you look to fast forward to today, when we talk about the theft of Black will and initiative, we're talking about the sapping of Black possibility by a white society that refuses to acknowledge the need to have equality in education. Most Black people still, despite Obamacare, use the emergency ward as healthcare maintenance because of the radical inequality in healthcare provision in this country. So these are ways in which the thievery, if you will, the theft of time, resource, skill, initiative, and ambition occur even in 2021.
We're going to take a little break, Doctor. Michael Eric Dyson, long time coming, Reckoning with Race in America. What a powerful book, Doctor. Take a little break. Back on the other side. This is America and the World. Underwriting for This is America and the World is made possible by the Japan-America Society of Washington, D.C., featuring the 29th National Japan Bowl, a Japanese language and culture competition, streaming live April 9th, 2021. The National Association for Children of Addiction, Faces and Voices of Recovery, the Forerunner Foundation, the Rotondaro Family Trust, the Sultanate of Oman, the Kingdom of Morocco, and the Embassy Series, Uniting People Through Musical Diplomacy. Dr. Dyson, long time coming, Reckoning with Race in America. 7 letters to victims of violence. Who'd you pick? Why?
I chose Elijah McClain, a young Black man, 23 years old, outside of Denver, Colorado, and Aurora. He was a beautiful, sweet soul, wore a ski mask one night because he had anemia and wanted to be warm. Long story short, the police were called. They ended up putting him in a chokehold. He said he couldn't breathe. They knocked him out twice. They rendered him unconscious twice. The rescue services arrived. They administered ketamine. A week later, he was dead in the hospital. A tragic situation. So I wanted to begin my book with him. Emmett Till, the 14-year-old from Chicago that we all know about, died in 1955 in Money, Mississippi, where he's visiting his relatives, and was accosted by 2 white men who said that he whistled at the wife of one of them, thrown into the river, became a symbol for the civil rights movement. I send a letter to Eric Garner, the man in Staten Island who first claimed, as far as we know on tape, "I can't breathe." And I write the letter to him, but also address George Floyd. Breonna Taylor, the young Black woman in Kentucky who was shot while she slept And to this day, only one policeman has been charged with a crime, and that was not for killing her, but for shooting it recklessly into the house of a neighbor, an apartment of the neighbor. I write a letter to Sandra Bland. Well, before that, Hadia Pendleton, the young 15-year-old black girl in Chicago, Illinois, not killed by a vigilante, not killed by a white supremacist or the cops, but killed by a young black man. And two of them, one who killed her and the other one who drove the getaway car, mistaking her for a gang member, are now serving, I think, life in prison, 3 lives lost. But I wanted to speak honestly and openly about that issue. Sandra Bland, the young black woman, left Chicago, went down to Texas, on tape, on film, was arrested, brutally mistreated, we believe, by a cop. 2 days later, when she was in jail, couldn't get out because of cash bond, and was found hung dead in her cell. And then finally, Reverend Clemente Pinckney, the minister of the Emmanuel Church in South Carolina, who was the pastor there leading Bible study when Dylan Roof went in and mowed them down in an act of racial violence. These are the people, the martyrs that I speak to in this book.
In the book, in these letters, not only the letters addressed to these deceased people, but also your own insights, your own anger, your own challenges.
Yes, sir.
What do you want white people to know?
Well, I want white brothers and sisters to know this is a problem. This is a trauma that we've endured. We heard you loud and clear when many of you joined the protest movement, Black Lives Matter, in May after George Floyd's death, an extraordinary outpouring of white participation. Those protests ended up being the largest in the nation's history against racial injustice. And why? Because the numbers of white people swole those protests. And we say, thank you. We acknowledge your commitment at that level. We acknowledge what happened after that. You know, companies saying we're going to change our policies, Hollywood saying we're going to be more just. We're going to get more black people involved. We're going to think about it, postings on social media and the like. But now is the harder part. And in my book, I wanted to address the difficulty and the trauma that we've endured, but the difficult part of saying you can't just be a good ally by identifying with us, though that is important, not simply by joining us in protest, though that is extremely important, but by changing your habits and dispositions at work, at home. What do you do now that we're 6 months after George Floyd's death? How do we talk about racial reckoning? It's barely in the news. Systemic racism was on the lips of every anchor for about a month or so. Now it's disappeared. I don't think we should be discouraged by that. We should be reminded that social change happens in the everyday. In the one sense, white brothers and sisters, many of whom had never had truck with Black America, fell in love with us that day. Now we're 6 months later, now the toothpaste is on the basin and the toilet seat is left up. Now we've gone from being in love to doing the unsexy everyday stuff. But this is where we are. The unsexy everyday stuff is what I want white brothers and sisters to do. Look at yourself, look at your community, look at your family, and you take a message that I will never be able to deliver because some white people simply will not hear me, but they will hear their cousin, their aunt, their uncle, their priest.
Looking between the lines, open the door a little bit. What are we missing?
Well, I think that for many people, they say, well, it really can't be that bad. I mean, come on, we're in America, you're black, you got a good job, your family's out there, come on. Yeah, there's some occasional missteps, but for the most part, you're good, you're in America. And we say, no, that's not how it works. Thank God for recordings, because, you know, the reason I think George Floyd compelled many white brothers and sisters to get involved, first, we were all at home because of the pandemic. Secondly, there were no asterisks involved. There were no excuses. Well, you must have been running. No, he's on the ground. You must have been sassing the police. No, he actually called them officer and sir. You must have been belligerent and dangerous. How? He's laying beneath the knees of 3 cops. So I think all the excuses were removed and white people saw, wow, this is what they've been talking about. So what I want to say to us, to white America especially, is what you've been missing is this stuff isn't just a circumstantial happening. Oh, it just happened to that guy, but it doesn't usually happen. It's routine. And the routine characterization of race is something that I think white brothers and sisters need to grapple with. And not just the sexy stuff out in the street. It's integrated in when you kick kids out of school early and early, 7, 8, and 9 years old. The prison pipeline is stuffed by people who are in high school, people who are in junior high school. Let's pay attention to that. And the systemic inequity means even if you don't call somebody the N-word, there's still a society that has a lot of black people locked up for nonviolent drug offenses. These are the kinds of things that I think many white people miss.
When you turn on the television and you see a George Floyd, you see a Breonna Taylor, you see an Ahmaud Arbery, what do you feel? What do you see?
It's despair, it's pain, it's trauma, it's being traumatized again. And here's what you know. You know pretty much that those dead black people, unless they are spotless and stainless, will have their names dragged through the mud, dragged through the infamous disregard for their persona. Oh, you must have done this. Look at Mike Brown. We saw you on camera stealing some cigarillos, the young man in Ferguson. Another tape that never got out showed that he had exchanged some cigarillos for weed. So there was a bartering system going on, and he was snatching it back. So we know that often many white brothers and sisters miss the fact that there is more to the story. And when I turn the television on and see that, it's painful, it's hurtful, it's tragic, and it's made even more tragic because so many people will look at it for a little while and switch the channel. Now, we all do that. But the problem is that there are systemic issues that have not been resolved, issues that need to be addressed that people don't have the bandwidth for, don't seem to have the capacity for. And that makes us very upset because we know that with this little upsurgence and little time of recognition will be met by a cloak of invisibility and inaudibility where we can't be seen or heard anymore.
I want to go back to my history and today. And talk a little bit about George Floyd. But before that, someone that resonated with me was Ahmaud Arbery. Georgia, jogging, white neighborhood.
Right.
As you say, hunted down, down, out of place, don't belong here. So that's history. Sounds familiar. Out of place, don't belong here. George Floyd. You call it a horizontal lynching today.
Yes.
Put both of those together for us. History, today.
Yes, sir. History, black people hunted down, killed, murdered on pickup trucks. People hunted them down in the woods, in urban situations, sometimes shot down. And the 4,000 and some souls who were lynched in this country, who were black and Mexican and others. So that's history. But today, Ahmaud Arbery in 2020 hunted down like an animal on the back roads of a community in Georgia that he should have, neighboring, abutting his community that he should have been able to walk down. He shouldn't have needed a license or, papers to prove he wasn't a runaway slave. He was a black man, curious about a home that was being developed and looked at it and then moved on, like so many other white people that they showed later on. But he became suspicious. They became suspicious of him. He was the dangerous outlier. And so the parallel between being hunted down like an animal, here he was, a witness that turned out later, of course, to be a white man who was charged along with the father and son tag team who murdered Mr. Arbery. The witness blocked him from escaping from the father and son and forced him between the two trucks, between the two vehicles. This is something out of a horror film from the 1940s and 50s and 60s when black people were routinely treated this way, out of place, in the wrong community, black curiosity being criminalized and ultimately becoming fatal. That's the parallel between Emmett Till and Ahmaud Arbery.
When you write about George Floyd and this horizontal lynching, that is a phrase that is powerful unto itself.
Yeah.
A horizontal lynching today. You write in the book, The knees of the nation have been on the necks of Black Americans for centuries.
Yes. Yes, sir. That horizontal lynching, not necessarily strung from a tree, mowed down, shot down, chased down, or held beneath the knee of Derek Chauvin, the former officer in Minneapolis. Yes, the knees of white America in terms of institutional power, in terms of political denial, in terms of systemic oppression, in terms of elevating whiteness and demonizing everything outside of its parameters. That's what we have had to contend with. And it continues to be lethal and fatal for so many Black people. Rayshard Brooks there in Atlanta, not long after Mr. Floyd being shot by a policeman in the back. We've talked about Breonna Taylor and Sandra Bland. We could talk about, Walter Scott down in South Carolina, shot in the back 7 times by a policeman who tried to pretend that he was afraid for his life. So these horizontal lynchings occur time and again. A lot of them won't be seen on television, won't be recorded with someone who happened to be there with a smartphone. And as a result of that, the invisibility of the trauma, the invisibility of the suffering continues. That's why I think horizontal lynching is the appropriate, though stark phrase to evoke a history of disregard for Black life and a consistent hatred of Blackness, a kind of anti-Blackness that is not necessarily conscious, but is deeply entrenched in American society.
You call Black rage hope turned inside out.
Yes, sir.
And here we are now with race and racism on the national agenda. I want you to link up 2 ideas for us: white comfort and blue plague.
Yes, sir. Well, when I think about white comfort, I think about the fact that for the comfort of white people, to comfort them in their ignorance, to comfort them in their lack of knowledge, to comfort them in their lack of initiative to do something conscious and remediating about race. That for the comfort of whiteness, no, it makes me fearful, it makes me fragile, it makes me nervous. Your Blackness challenges me. When you kneel on a gridiron, Colin Kaepernick, it makes us feel hateful toward you because we think you're disrespecting the flag. The comfort of having a symbol of a flag represent the entire nation, supposedly, and then fly a Confederate flag, many white brothers and sisters who are traitors to the nation, and yet a man who is sympathetic to the nation, loyal to the nation, I think not an Army veteran, but certainly a military veteran, Nate Boyer, said to him, when you sit on the ground or on the bench when the anthem is playing, it's disrespectful to those soldiers. Why don't you take a knee? He did that out of respect for those soldiers, and yet he was still pilloried. So when we think about the white comfort, it's the comfort to not know about Black culture. It's the comfort of not being confronted with the invidious ways in which racism has operated in this country. And then the blue plague, of course, is the degree to which police people are granted immunity from hurting and harming Black people. That even if they didn't have qualified immunity guaranteed to them by the Constitution or local law, they have a kind of cultural cover that no matter what they do to Black people in the name of the badge and the gun and the baton, they will usually not be held to account.
Michael Eric Dyson, Reckoning with Race in America, as I said at the beginning, a powerful book. Dr. Dyson, what is one thing we can do right now?
I think all of us as American citizens can hold our police departments locally to account. And then secondly, we can vote for people who have a broader insight about the nature of American democracy that will preserve and protect the ideals of the Founding Fathers.
Tough conversation. Are you hopeful? Are you optimistic?
I'm not optimistic, but I am hopeful. Optimism, the theologian Reinhold Niebuhr said, is you put your finger out there to figure out which way the wind is blowing. He said, that's a shallow virtue. Hope is deep. Even when there's no evidence, there's the belief that things can get better. That's what I meant by rage is Black love turned inside out. You wouldn't be that upset if you didn't believe that there was something that was missing and that there was something you could do. And the difference, by the way, between black rage and white rage in this country, black rage seeks to bring social justice to bear to make sure that the founding principles are observed. White rage seems to use the government for its own particular purposes to reinforce its narrow conception of American democracy. That's a huge difference that ought to be paid attention to when we talk about Antifa versus, say, when we talk about the Proud Boys in this country.
Dr. Dyson, thank you so much for the education. Great to be with you.
God bless you, my friend. Always great to talk to you.
Thank you. For information about This Is America in the World, visit our website, thisisamerica.net, or our YouTube channel, This Is America TV, and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Underwriting for This Is America in the World is made possible by the Japan-America Society of Washington, D.C., featuring the 29th National Japan Bowl, a Japanese language and culture competition, streaming live April 9th, 2021. The National Association for Children of Addiction. Faces and Voices of Recovery. The Forerunner Foundation. The Rotondaro Family Trust. The Sultanate of Oman. The Kingdom of Morocco, and the Embassy Series, Uniting People Through Musical Diplomacy.